Is this the worst wife ever or just comedy? Hello everyone, I'm Sarah from Everyday Starlet. Welcome to my channel. I make videos to inspire you to be the star of your own life. Today we are talking about comedian Akaash Singh and his wife Jasleen. I hope I'm saying their names right. If you're not familiar, Akaash Singh is a stand-up comedian and he's also one of the co-hosts of the Flagrant podcast. His wife Jasleen is actually a co-host of a new podcast called the Main Character Energy podcast. They've been in some drama lately because Jasleen has said some things that people deemed as disrespectful to her husband. Their marriage has kind of been under a microscope lately, and so I thought I would break it down and talk about it. Before I get into this, my usual disclaimers. First of all, I don't know anybody in this video. I don't know anybody personally, so I don't know what people are like behind closed doors. I am simply analyzing their relationship based on the public images and the public personas and the information that's available to everybody. And at the end of the day, like, the stuff I'm talking about isn't really even about the people I'm talking about. These are really about the lessons that we can take into our own lives so we can have happier, healthier lives and relationships. Well, I want to state that I do not know Akaash and Jasleen personally. I did work as a stand-up comedian for 15 years of my life, so I'm very familiar with the comedy world, the comedy industry, and the life of a comic, and I was married for a little while I was a comic, so I know what it's like to be in a relationship as a comic. So I do have a little bit of insight on their relationship from the perspective of the stand-up world, as well as just an analysis of their relationship, just generally speaking as somebody on the outside looking in. So let's get into the drama. So Akaash Singh's wife, Jasleen, started a podcast with a friend of hers. It's called the Main Character Energy podcast, I think, or the Main Character podcast. I listened to one episode of it. It was an episode that started out with just Jasleen and her friend talking about just life and stuff. And then they brought on their husbands, Akaash and Nav, I think, is the other girl's husband. I guess the point of their podcast generally is kind of to convince women to have like main character energy, be the main character in their own life, which I'm all for that. I absolutely am. It's a big part of my platform, Everyday Starlet, and I want women to, embrace their main character energy. I want women to be the star of their own life. I want women to, decenter men and, really focus on themselves and working on themselves, whether they're in a relationship or not. So I'm all for that. I do have to say, just in like the one episode that I listened to of the Main Character podcast, they're like 10 plus years younger than I am. So it is very possible that some of it is just a generational thing. I wasn't fully into it. I think that their vibe and their energy just wasn't really a vibe for me. If it is for other people, that's cool. Like, not everybody's for everybody. One of the issues that I think I have with a podcast like this, and especially the way they're presenting it, is there is kind of a pushback to women becoming like the main character or the star of their own life, and women kind of like embracing themselves and really like learning to step into their own power and energy, and decentering men. Is that there's a lot of pushback to people claiming that it's narcissistic of women, which is ridiculous because in reality, statistically speaking, most narcissists are men. I'm not making that up. That's just literally 80% of narcissists are male. That is a statistic that's out there. We accept narcissistic behavior in men a lot more than we do in women. So women's narcissistic behavior does tend to get called out more. But like being the main character of your own life, being the star of your own life, owning your own power as a woman is not inherently narcissistic. But the accusation of narcissism is something that unfortunately happens in our society when women start doing that. So when I see women that are kind of pushing the main character energy narrative, but they're acting very narcissistic, I find that frustrating because I feel like it's just reiterating the stereotype that people already have, that like women who are embracing their main character energy are inherently narcissistic, which the two do not have to go together. There were a lot of signs in the podcast that I was watching that Jasleen has a lot of narcissistic tendencies. And I'm not saying she's a full-on narcissist because I can't make the assessment of that just based on what I watched. But there were aspects that do indicate that she has narcissistic tendencies. And she might be playing it up because she thinks that's part of like the character and the image. But I just don't like the fact that we're even inviting the association. So there were a few indications, like at one point, Akaash was saying in the podcast that the worst day of Jasleen's life is his birthday, because she hates that there's a day that's about him, that she has to be nice to him the whole day, and he can tell that's draining on her. And again, they might just be playing this up for the humor, and I'll get into analyzing the humor in a minute, but that's a big sign of narcissistic behavior. Like, if you can't have one day be about someone else, and you can't be like nice to someone for one day. Now, granted, there's two sides to the story. Maybe he is more difficult on his birthday, so she is finding it draining because he's acting a certain way. I don't know. They didn't get into that. But that is a warning sign of narcissism if you can't even let one day be about another person. And I don't really believe that that's like main character energy. That starts to get into narcissism. Two different things, right? Like, owning your own power and being the main character and the star of your own life doesn't have to mean that you disregard the feelings of other people. Like, and I think that that's where we get into like some weird gray areas here. Also, like when they got into in the conversation in the podcast where like Akaash was saying that he found it frustrating if he got a reservation at like a really difficult to get into restaurant or something, and like Jasleen would be 2 hours late and she'd be all like, well, they should be grateful that we're even gracing them with our presence. That's not really main character energy, because I mean, like, how many main characters in movies act like that? Like, think about that for a second. Like, if you were to watch a main character in a movie acting like that, you'd probably be really off-put by it. That's just rude. Like, not even just to your spouse, but to other people, which is interesting because later on in the podcast, one of the, I think it was the husband of her co-host, was saying that like it was a big red flag if a woman was rude to waiters. And they didn't say that like Jasleen was rude to the wait staff at the restaurant, but the idea that, oh, they would just hold the reservation because they should be grateful for our presence or something like that. Like, that energy is inherently not just rude to her husband, but that's like rude to other people. And I think that there is a fine line there when you get into like, okay, you're just owning that you're the main character in your life and being the star of your own life. But think about like big stars, people that we think of, like when we think of a movie and somebody like owning being the main character, they're not going around and just being rude to everybody else. Like, they're not going around and mistreating everybody else. Like, the people that we think of as being like main characters and having a lot of like main character energy in the world, like you think about people like a Princess Diana, and like she was known for her charitable work. She wasn't known for just being like, and she literally was a princess, but we don't think of her as having that like princess entitlement aspect. And I think there's something to like just owning your worth and owning your place in life and owning, you know, that you are the main character in your life and you are the star of your life. Like, there's something to owning that, but then there's also crossing into this area of narcissism where everybody is just designed to like cater to you. And I think there's a fine line there. And I think for me personally, I don't like when women try to paint narcissistic behavior as just main character energy or just as empowerment, when it's not really. Like, you can have empowerment, you can be the main character of your life, you can be the star of your life, but you can still also care about other people. And that's where I don't like the representation, in the same way that like I don't like when you get some of these like red pill podcasters that start touting masculinity in a way that's actually like unhealthy and dangerous, because I'm like, I think masculinity is a very good thing. But when you get people that are portraying masculinity as being just basically being jerks, it ruins the term masculinity. Like, I just think that there's a lot of people out there that are trying to sell people on an idea, and they're actually ruining the idea that they're selling people on because they're not the right person to be selling that idea. I hope that made sense. I know I rambled there, but like, again, that was kind of where some of it bothered me. And I do think that like the vibe of the whole main character energy podcast felt off to me. And again, some of it might be because I'm older, different generation or whatever. Like, it could be just that, but I just didn't like the vibe. If you like the vibe and that's their vibe and whatever, that's fine. But it just, there were things about it that just kind of, I was like, no, that just doesn't seem right to me. So one of the defenses that I've seen of the Akaash Singh and his wife Jasleen situation is that it's comedy. Like, she's playing a character, he makes jokes, she makes jokes, playing it off as comedy. I was a stand-up for many years of my life, so I have a lot of like up close and personal knowledge of the stand-up world. There is an interesting phenomenon, and I've noticed it more with like men who date female comics, but I do think it can go in reverse, is when someone starts dating a comic, they all of a sudden feel like they're a comic. It's strange because I don't really think that you see that in a lot of other professions. Like if someone starts dating a plumber, I don't think that they automatically start thinking that they're a plumber, you know what I mean, or something like that. But there's something about doing comedy and when people get into a relationship with a professional comedian that makes them themselves think that they are a comedian. And again, I see it a little bit more, like I've experienced that, like I've seen it a lot when I've dated guys while I was working as a stand-up, where they all of a sudden thought that they were funny and that they were a comedian, and it's just like, no, you're dating a comedian. Like that's not, like, you're not a professional comic, like, so you're not the professional here. But I'm seeing that with like Akaash and Jasleen. I'm seeing that, like, as they've been together for a long time, it's starting to feel a little bit like she now thinks she's the comedian. This is where I think that there's some weird gray area when it comes to comedy and the online space. When you're doing a stand-up show or a sketch comedy show or something, or even if somebody is a comedian, like their profession is comedian, like next to their name, it is comedian, like they're a professional comedian, they're paid to be funny as a professional comic. And I'm a comedy snob, so I tend to be more in the camp. I'm very old school with this. I'm like, all right, if you haven't done stand-up or done comedy professionally on a stage in front of people, I don't really consider you a comic. Like, I don't really count people that just make like funny jokes on social media as being a comic. But that's my old school stance on things. But when you are somebody who is established as a professional comic, you've been paid to be funny, particularly you've been paid to be funny in like a professional performance setting or something, and you can put comedian next to your name. It's different than somebody just getting online and just saying things because they think that they're funny. And while I do agree that like anybody can get online and say whatever they want, that's just the way the world is. I mean, not anything obviously, because there's limitations, but when you do stand up in like a comedy show, say somebody is hired as a comedian, they're on stage and they're performing stand up, right? There is a sense where you're kind of stepping out of reality a little bit, and you understand that what the people are saying on stage is jokes. It's for humor's sake. You get a lot more comedic license with what you're saying. It doesn't necessarily all have to be true. And with most of us comics, and I can say this from my years of doing stand-up, for most of us, like there's usually a kernel of truth in what we're talking about, but we do use a lot of comedic license to make certain stories heightened or certain situations, you know, shift a little bit for the sake of a joke. And so it's not necessarily like the stuff we're talking about is like word for word true, but there's usually a kernel of truth in it. Like I'll use the example of like I used to do a bit where I would talk about like an ex-boyfriend, but the stuff I was talking about was not actually about like one particular ex-boyfriend. It was actually like jokes and bits and things that I had written about, like, you know, a couple different guys that I dated, or, you know, one guy maybe I just went on one date with and there was a funny aspect about that, and maybe something a friend told me about a guy she dated, and you kind of meld it together into this one person because you want to simplify it for the audience and you're making a joke for humor's sake. It's just honed and crafted for the stage and the performance of comedy. But it's established because you're at a comedy show. One of the problems with doing comedy online, especially if you're not a professional comedian, and again, I'm not saying that people can't do it, people can't go online and be funny, but when you show up online and you're like playing a character or just trying to be funny, you haven't established to people, because people do get online and just talk about their own personal stuff, or they talk about something that's factual, or they talk about things that are research studies, or just like, you know, more serious topics or things like that. When you come online and you just start like playing a character or just making jokes, you haven't established with the audience that it's a joke. So that's why you get a lot of pushback from people, Jasleen Singh being the most recent kind of drama around this, where she'll say things and then it's just like, I'm making jokes, like my husband makes jokes. It's like, okay, well, when Akaash Singh makes a joke and he's on stage, or even on his social media where it's established that he is a professional comedian, we now have a basis for that is humor. Whereas when Jasleen Singh gets on social media and says some outrageous things and then she's like, it's just a joke, it's like, okay, but you're married to a comedian, but you haven't established to the audience that this is jokes because you're not a professional comedian. And I have seen her get online and say that, you know, it's misogyny because she's getting criticized for things that her husband does. Well, you know what? If Jasleen wants to get on stage and work on a stand-up routine and be a professional stand-up, and that's what she wants to do, more power to her. I was a woman in comedy. I know how difficult it is. She would have an easier time because she's married to somebody who's already an established comic, so she'd probably get a stand-up special within a year, but that's a whole other conversation. But again, if she wanted to do that and she was told she couldn't do that because she's a woman, that would be misogyny. But she's trying to do something that she's claiming is the equivalent of what her husband's doing when it's not actually the equivalent of what her husband's doing, because her husband has actually established himself as a comedian and is making jokes, whereas she's just showing up online and saying things and then claiming it's a joke. They're two different aspects to things. Now look, I'll be the first to say that men and women are treated differently when it comes to comedy and humor, and in the comedy space, women are still not treated as well as they should be. It's still a man's profession for sure. There's a lot of aspects to that. However, if you're gonna look at these things and you're gonna start claiming that, oh, the man can get away with this, but the woman can't, you have to look at this. All things are not equal in this situation. If they were both stand-ups and they were both doing stand-up comedy, he was getting away with it and she wasn't, that would be misogyny. If he was just going online and making jokes about his wife and she was just going online making jokes about her husband and he was allowed to do it and she wasn't, still misogyny. He's an established professional comedian, she isn't. That's where the difference is. When she says outrageous things for rage bait and things like that, and then is like, it's just a joke, it's, you know, it's not the equivalent of her husband who's a comic making those jokes. There's a distinction. And honestly, I see this a lot online on social media, and as someone who was a professional comic who is very old school, like I don't really respect people who just get online and just make jokes. And you're like, I'm a comic. As someone who had to do the work to establish herself as a professional comedian, that's also one of the reasons why when I make the content online that I do, like I choose not to show up as a comedian. I don't actually do stand-up right now. I kind of walked away from it during the pandemic and I just didn't go back to it, honestly, because I just didn't want to deal with the late nights and the dive bars and stuff like that. But at the end of the day, like, if I happen to say something funny or make a joke or something like while I'm making videos, it comes out and I'm happy to intertwine some humor, and if you do find some humor in what I say, that's wonderful. I feel like I have more of a responsibility for how I choose to show up on my channel to try to impart wisdom and share information and share my thoughts on things on here. And there's times when I'm like, ooh, I could make a joke right now, but I feel like that diminishes the message, and I always want the message that I'm sharing to be more important than making the joke. And I personally hold myself to a higher responsibility. So I think if you're gonna show up online and you're gonna kind of claim to be some kind of, people don't really use the term life coach anymore, but you're gonna show up as sort of a life coach, helping people, kind of a thing where you want to like inspire people to better themselves or something. I do believe that it is also your responsibility to use humor carefully, and that the humor that you use should never diminish your message, and it should also never be harmful. So the idea that people are showing up on social media and their thing is like, I want to, I don't know, inspire people to be better or motivate people to be better. If you're using humor and it actually is diminishing your message, or it's actually giving information that could be harmful to people, personally, like I have my own morals and ethics that just feel like that's wrong. I know a lot of people online don't have those morals and ethics, and a lot of them do a lot better and are more successful than me, but I feel like I have to hold true to my own morals and ethics. And I know I went on a whole tangent about that, but I feel very strongly about that, so I just really wanted to throw that out there. And I'm gonna break down some of the things about Akaash and Jasleen that I think are red flags, and you know, some him and some her and things like that. But I do want to add in that some people have been calling Jasleen a gold digger because she is kind of getting a lot of princess treatment and things like that. I do want to state that it's my understanding, and their backstory, I feel like I've tried to look into it. It's a little foggy as far as like how long they've been together, when they got together, what ages they were when they got together. It's a little fuzzy, but it's my understanding that she got together with Akaash Singh before he was famous. So when he was sort of just like struggling as a stand-up. And I can say, as someone who worked as a stand-up for many years, being in a relationship with a stand-up, and I can say this about guys that have dated me in the past, especially when it's a stand-up who's still working their way up in the industry and stuff like that, it's a tough life. It's a tough life, and it's difficult to be in a relationship with that person. And you know, when you are with someone who's like coming up in the industry and you don't know whether they're going to get success, and they have to do I mean, there's a lot of really awkward schedules and late nights and being on the road and all this kind of stuff. Like, that's not an easy life for a couple. And so people that do get into relationships with somebody, you know, when they're still struggling and they're not established and they're not making a pile of money and stuff, like, that's a tough life. And so I think labeling her as just a gold digger who's only with him for the money, she was with him before he got the fame and success that he has now. So I think that that's relevant to point out, because, you know, if she was just a gold digger, I don't know if she would spend her time putting up with the life of a comic that was, you know, struggling to make it in comedy, because it is a rough life, I will say. And I'm sure that some of my exes even would be like, yeah, no, it's not easy dating a comic. And one of the reasons why, for me, doing stand-up, I had a pretty strict rule. I was kind of known for this in like Boston comedy. I didn't date comics, because I could probably do a whole video about all the reasons why you should not date a stand-up comedian. And I say that as someone who worked as one for many years. It's not an easy life. It's not an easy life, and most comics, myself included, usually have some issues, just saying. A few things about Akaash Singh and Jasleen and the way they got together. It's still fuzzy. I've tried looking up information, but because they're not like that famous yet, it's been hard to find like solid answers as to like how long they've been together, what their ages were. I feel like I saw a video where she said how old they were when they met, and then he said how old they were when they met, and they were kind of two different ages, but they were close enough. She was in her early 20s, he was in his early 30s. It's about a 10-year age gap between the two of them. 10 years is an age gap, I think, for me, I think is the most anyone should go. I don't think you should ever go more than 10 years. I think that's when you start to get really creepy, and when you get to people who are in totally different places in life. Anything over 10 years starts to get really creepy. But I also think that that 10-year gap should be for people over the age of 25. When we're talking under the age of 25, I think people between the ages of 18 and 25 like should pretty much, and even like someone who's 18 and 25 starts to get weird. But yeah, I think somebody who's like, say like 21 and 31, no. And that's about the age that they were when they got together. Now, Akaash, I haven't met him, but I feel like when I see him online and things like that, as someone who did stand up for many years, I've worked with a lot of guys like an Akaash. I feel like I know his type pretty well. And the fact that he says he was a virgin until he met his now wife. So he was like 31-ish, and she's like 21, and he's claiming they were both virgins. Seems to have come out now that they've obviously had done things with other people. I'm always weirded out by people that like, they'll do a lot of stuff with other people, but they get hung up on the idea that, oh, well, I was a virgin for this person. I don't know. I always find people that are really picky with that distinction. Like, I understand, like, when you lose your virginity, your business. You want to save yourself for marriage, you want to save yourself for a certain person or whatever, your business. I'm not here to judge that. But I have always found it strange when people get super obsessed with like the virginity aspect, but yet they'll do everything else with a lot of other people. Like, I've noticed this. Some people, not everybody, but some people who I've met who are obsessed with the idea that they're virgins, they're actually like some of the sluttiest people I've ever met. And that has always been so weird to me. It's like this weird obsession with virginity, but yet you'll do everything else with anybody else. I don't get that mentality. I don't really understand it. I mean, maybe this is like a religious programming thing that I just don't have. I don't know. That's always kind of fascinating to me. I know there's like a weird gray area where now people are saying that like, oh, Akaash saved himself for Jasleen, but like she's implying that she didn't actually save herself. She just told him that she was a virgin when they got together, because some of the other things she's saying imply that she wasn't. And now she's snapping back at people saying like, well, who are you to say when I lost my virginity? When it's like, well, you're kind of saying things that are implying you didn't. Now look, frankly, I think the fact that we're so obsessed about whether or not these people were virgins when they got together or weren't or whatever is weird. It's a weird conversation to have, and frankly not any of our business, but they're kind of making it our business by talking about it all the time. I gotta admit, I think it's a little weird for a 31-year-old man who's been working as a stand-up, I'm assuming, for a while at that point, to still be a virgin. And I'm not judging anybody who is, But like Akaash is not like a terrible looking guy. I know he's on the shorter side or whatever, but like I've been in the stand-up world. When guys are stand-ups and they're good at stand-ups, and they don't even have to be great as stand-ups, women in bars are drinking. Like I've seen guys that absolutely have nothing going for them except the fact that they're funny. Whole women that I'm like, how did you even do that? Like I don't like, and again, it's his choice. Maybe it's a cultural thing. I don't know, but I'm usually like, a virgin at 31. And then the fact that he was a virgin at 31 and he had to date a woman who was 21, that gets into a whole red flag territory right there, because it's like, I don't think there's any circumstance where a 31-year-old guy should be dating a 21-year-old girl. And I know everyone's, it's legal, it's weird. And that to me, again, I don't know enough about them personally and their whole story, but that's feeling very red flag to me. Like the whole thing is very red flag. And I don't know Akaash Singh, but having been in stand-up for many, many years, so I've known a lot of guys like him, he strikes me as somebody who's very insecure, very common with stand-ups. I was a stand-up, I was very insecure, so I'm personalizing on this for sure, but like, having known a lot of men who were stand-ups in the course of my life, stand-ups tend to be very insecure people. Very insecure. Like we're the classic, like we can dish it out, but we can't take it. The way that Akaash talks to Jasleen, I'm like, he is deeply insecure. Like you can tell he's deeply insecure. He clearly thinks that she's out of his league. I can tell. And he's always throwing out little digs at her because you can tell he's insecure. The interesting thing about Akaash and Jasleen that I've noticed is she's getting a lot of attacks right now for the way that people are saying that she's disrespecting her husband. Take Akaash out of the situation and just look at Jasleen. If you just look at Jasleen's behavior and you don't look at who her husband is or what he's doing or how he's acting, you just look at her, the things that she's saying and the way that she's talking about her husband, about her past, about, you know, how attracted she is to her friend's husband, all these kind of things. I'm gonna get into some of these in a little bit more detail. Red flags. I will acknowledge they're red flags. However, let's flip it and just look at Akaash, the way Akaash talks about his wife, the way he talks, you know, about her and even to her and things like that. He kind of talks down to her. He kind of almost talks to her as if she's a child. I mean, he does kind of say she's adorable all the time, which is a weird thing to kind of call like your adult wife. He really diminishes her intelligence, and I'm not saying she's intelligent, but like he really does kind of talk down to her as if she's not that smart. He does diminish her. Well, he'll just kind of talk about like, oh, well, she just had a big ass and I decided to ask her out or something like that. Like he kind of diminishes her to just a sex object or just her looks or something like that. Like the way that he talks about her is a red flag too. So I kind of feel like Jasleen is getting a lot of criticism for kind of being like disrespectful to her husband. But I gotta admit, like if a guy were to talk to me like Akaash talks to his wife, and maybe she's okay with it and that's, you know, their choice, they're both adults, I would be offended. Like I would not take that very well. And it's feeling like they both seem to be pretty disrespectful of each other publicly. And they're kind of playing it like this is for content and it's for jokes, and if they're both okay with it and that's what they want to do, that's fine. But I do find it interesting that they both tend to disrespect each other, but because the Red Pill podcasters jumped on it, they tend to be jumping on her as to her disrespecting him, but they're never going to call out him disrespecting her. And the thing that we have to remember is that women respond to how men show up. You want to change women, you got to change men. Men set the tone for the relationship. That's how men are the leaders. Okay, men always think that being the leader means you just tell people what to do and you boss people around. That's not how the masculine energy leads. They lead by setting the tone. They set the tone for the relationship. If a man treats his wife a certain way, she's going to react in response to how he treats her. That's how he leads. I will say, like, he isn't exactly talking about her in the most respectful way either. So I think that's a valid thing to look at. Now look, my read of the Akaash and Jasleen Singh situation is that he is deeply insecure. He's a comic. Most comics are deeply insecure. A lot of times we seem really arrogant and cocky, but most comics are deeply insecure. He puts Jasleen up on a pedestal and sees her as out of his league, which is partly the reason why she gets the princess treatment that she does. This is where I think women can kind of start going down the wrong path, because I get it. it's very easy to look at that situation and say, okay, well, Jasleen's getting the princess treatment. She's getting treated really well by this guy. He's spoiling her rotten. She treats him like crap and he just keeps giving her stuff and he seems to put her up on a pedestal, and isn't that a good thing? You have to look a level deeper. He loves to throw in little digs at her. And it's like, it's in a cutesy way. It's like, oh, she's so adorable. It's like she's 31. Like, calling her adorable at 31 is degrading. Like, he kind of knocks down her intelligence. He does kind of make reference to her physical appearance as if like he's just attracted to her physically, kind of almost sum it up as if like it's just a physical attraction kind of thing. Deeply insecure men that date women that they put up on pedestals that they perceive as being out of their league will try to tear you down gradually. Oftentimes they'll play it off as humor, and you know, with like Akaash being a comedian, it's easy to kind of cover that up. But look, again, as someone who did stand up for many, many years, who loves jokes, who loves humor, who loves being in relationships with people who you can exchange jokes with, you can have witty banter, like I love all that stuff. But behind jokes, there's usually a kernel of truth. And when you have this dynamic, and if you really watch like how Akaash talks about Jasleen or like to Jasleen, he's irritated by the situation and he's playing it like humor, like, oh, she's so adorable, oh, well, she had a big butt so I chased her. Like, there's something beneath those jokes that's his insecurity, and he has to tear her down because he perceives her to be out of his league, which is partly also the reason why he lets her walk all over him. And it's getting to him. He's playing it like it's not, but you can tell beneath the surface it's getting to him. And I think there's a lot of women that are gonna look at that situation from the outside and be like, well, she's getting everything she wants and he worships her and she gets her way. And she's also playing into that by also taking digs at him and going after him and kind of like trying to knock him down. And he's playing it up and he's putting up with it because he perceives her as out of his league. But he is going to keep building that resentment and building that resentment, and his digs are going to get worse and worse and worse. And I know they're playing some of this up for the cameras, and I would 1000% believe that a lot of what they're doing is because he's got a big stand-up special coming up that he's trying to promote, and she's, you know, got a new podcast and stuff, and like they want the drama. And for a lot of people, you know, any publicity is good publicity. So it's like he's like, okay, I'll look like a simp for a little bit, people forget about it after a while and whatever, and we'll just both make a pile of money. He'll make it in stand-up and, you know, selling at his stand-up shows because people are going to want to go and see if he talks about this scandal in his stand-up shows. She's going to get more attention. She's getting a lot of hate attention right now, but she'll get more attention for social media. They'll both be raking in the money and they'll make a lot of money. I do think a lot of this is just played up, you know, for the image and for a money-making thing. Personally, I think they're giving a horrible representation of a marriage, and I think they're actually doing a lot more damage than good, but they're making a lot of money. Again, I think some of it comes down to ethics and like, are you willing to sell out to make money? And I get frustrated with that because, you know, I personally like feel a responsibility to show up and try to help people and not make people's lives worse. And a lot of people just don't care. They will show up and say whatever that happens to be shocking and scandalous or whatever so that they can make more money. Everybody's got to live with themselves at the end of the day, I guess. But yeah, the relationship dynamic between the two of them is kind of a ticking time bomb. There was a video clip that somebody shared that was Jasleen talking to Akaash saying that like if they have sons they're gonna be wimps because like he's only 5'7". And I want to make a note about that because I feel like men's heights have been a huge topic of conversation. They kind of always are, but like I've been seeing a lot more of this coming up now. Here's the thing. Men's heights matter to men more than they matter to women. I'm not saying that men's heights don't matter to women. They do. Most women prefer to date men who are taller than them, but most women's expectations for men's heights are not as ridiculous as like social media or in men's minds that they think that they are. Most women are not out there saying that a man has to be over 6'4". Some women feel that way. I feel like the only women that have those kind of like insane height requirements for men are either women who are like super short, so they have this weird fetish for like a guy who's insanely tall because they're trying to get some height into their genetics, which usually ends up backfiring because usually then the kids will take after the mom, or like the daughters will take after the dad and be super tall and never be as tiny and petite as their mom, but the sons will end up being like short and wimpy because they'll be more the size of their mom. And we've just produced a whole bunch more like short guys because the short girls decided to target the tall guys. that's a whole thing in itself. So it's either really short women that kind of fetishize these really super tall, like ridiculously tall men, or it's really tall women that just want a guy who's like their height or a little bit taller. The average woman isn't really that obsessed with a man's height as long as he's a little bit taller than her. And in reality, the average height of a woman is 5'4". The average height of a man is 5'10". So the majority of women are actually shorter than the majority of men. So in reality, men's height is not as big a deal. I can also tell you from years of working in stand-up, so I have been around many men in the course of my life working in a male-dominated field, and men of different heights, ages, builds, ethnic groups, ages, social skills, like across the board. I can tell you very confidently that men's heights only held them back from finding women if they believed that their height held them back. Men who just didn't believe that their height held them back, I mean, there were some women that probably weren't going to date them, maybe because they weren't the ideal height. But like, I've seen guys, like short guys and not even the most attractive, pull some amazing women because they had either like a great personality or, you know, confidence or something. Like, there's so many options for men to make up for shortcomings. And I have also never in my life, and I've talked to a lot of men over the course of my life, you know, working in a male-dominated field, and I've met a lot of guys who said that height was the thing that held them back from finding a relationship. I've never met a man who said that, who within a 5-minute conversation of them, I couldn't give them a list of a dozen other reasons why women didn't want to date them that had nothing to do with their height. Like, it was not their height that was the problem, it was always their personality. And also, it's the chip on their shoulder from thinking that the height was what held them back. If a guy just was confident and didn't think that height was a problem, it was rarely a problem. That's been my experience. I think guys focus on height being the problem because they know they can't fix that, right? Like, if a guy's just like, well, I'm not tall enough, so I can't get women, they can say that because they know they can't do anything about that. Whereas if they actually focused on things they could improve, like their social skills or their financial situation, if they actually admitted that it was things that they could work on that were the issue, they'd have to work on them. So they focus on the thing that they can't work on because they can't change their height. So it's easy for them to fall into that victimhood and not actually focus on the things that they can work on and they can improve, which actually will take them a lot farther with women than their height ever will anyway. I realize that's not like an Akaash specific situation because I don't know if he's ever talked about his height being an issue, but because he is like 5'7", so he's on the shorter side, and because he is in this relationship that isn't very healthy and does seem to have a lot of insecurity issues, I'm guessing that some of the reason why he feels like he has to be treated this way and why he's taking digs at his wife and thinks she's out of his league and things like that, like I'm guessing there's some height and insecurity issues that are tied to that in some way. Just an assumption, but I wouldn't be surprised. Okay, so the biggest red flag in the Akaash Jasleen Singh relationship, there was drama around the fact that Jasleen was kind of lusting after her podcast co-star's husband. A lot of people have been showing clips of Jasleen kind of talking about her co-star's husband. I believe his name is Nav, and she was kind of gushing about like his face card never declines, like his body's amazing, like talking about how she thinks he might be in bed, talking about trying to get a threesome going, like stuff like that. So hear me out. At first, I was willing to give her the benefit of the doubt in that this maybe is how she interacts with her friend. Like, maybe she thinks that this is a compliment to her friend, like, hey, your husband's so hot, like, congratulations, you've got a great husband. And again, because Jasleen obviously has this thing where she thinks she's a comedian because she's married to a comedian, so she thinks that she's funny. Like, I was willing to give that conversation a little bit of leeway. Would it make me uncomfortable if I had a friend who was talking about like the man I was in a relationship like that? Yes. Do I think it's uncomfortable, and do I think that, you know, if her friend was uncomfortable or if Jasleen's husband was uncomfortable, like, I could totally understand why people would be uncomfortable with that. That said, I was willing to give that leeway as to like, maybe that's just how they talk to each other. And maybe it's an inside joke. And one of the things about stand-up that I'm sure like Akaash understands, but not everybody understands about humor, is that inside jokes oftentimes don't translate to the outside. But people who are not professional comics oftentimes don't get that. I've seen that in stand-up many years. People that get on stage and they try to do inside jokes, and it's like, inside jokes among your friends doesn't usually work on the outside. I was willing to give that leeway. until I got to the part of the main character podcast where Jasleen and her co-star, I should remember her name, brought their husbands on. So it's Akaash and Nav are on the show. And so it's the four of them all having conversations, and they start getting into Nav, and he had some like issues with the law because he was doing some business stuff that kind of wasn't totally legal when he was a teenager and stuff like that, whatever. The way Jasleen was lusting after him, like the energy of that, it's not just a joke. Like, she's not just playing into the joke. She is lusting after her friend's husband in front of her friend and in front of Jasleen's own husband. That's when I was like, okay, no, red flag, glaring red flag. Like, the fact that she's lusting after this other man, like, I personally not only think that her husband should be uncomfortable with that, but I think her friend should be uncomfortable with that too. And this is coming from somebody who was willing to overlook it, even though I found it uncomfortable. I was willing to chalk it up to like she's just being funny, or maybe this is just how her friends and her talk to each other. I was even willing to let that slide. But then seeing the way that Jasleen was like talking to Nav, her friend's husband, in front of Jasleen's own husband, I was like, nope, nope, she wants him. And she's clearly obsessed. Like, she even talked about meeting like her friend's husband, Nav's dad, and she's like, oh, I know he has like big D energy from what I've heard, and like all this kind of stuff. Like, that's what she wants. She's married to Akaash. I think she likes the idea that she has a husband who she can take advantage of, but she's not attracted to a man that she can take advantage of. She's fantasizing about the guy that she can't take advantage of. That's gonna cause a problem long term. And now look, Akaash has traveled on the road. He talked about that. He talked about traveling and doing stand-up and whatever. As someone who did stand-up for many years, I didn't do a lot of road comedy, but I know a lot of road comics and I've met a lot of road comics. Most of them aren't faithful. In the same way, you get a lot of pro athletes or, you know, musicians or things that travel a lot of them aren't faithful. He's gone a lot. Maybe he's doing his own thing. I don't know. Jasleen's obviously looking. And the fact that she has a husband who's gone a lot, I don't know. I don't think it bodes well for their relationship. At the end of the day, I feel like the message for a lot of men, and I talk a lot about the Madonna complex and the good girl, bad girl thing that we put women into, like the categories of like women have to be either all the good girl or all the bad girl. Men are put in their own categories as well, like by themselves, by each other, by society, by women, by everybody. Like, men have their own version of that, which is kind of like the alpha or the beta male, if you want to call it, the nice guy or the bad boy type of thing. You know, men have that too. And at the end of the day, as much as women are never going to be fully satisfied being like just the virginal wife or like just the mistress, like they want to be both. Like, they want to feel like they are the wife that has the commitment, that has the security, but they also want to feel like they are desired like a mistress. Men need to find their place within like being a nice guy in the sense of like being a good human, right? I mean, the nice guy kind of implies that you're a wimp and you're a pushover, and that's not good. Like, you have to be like bad boy enough so that you can actually have a backbone and stand up for yourself. Because most women long term are not going to want a guy that they can just walk all over. You know, I mean, they don't want a guy who's going to treat them like crap and who's going to be, you know, rude to them and treat them poorly, but they also don't want a guy that they can walk all over. Most women are going to want a guy who can stand up for himself while also being a good human and treating her with respect and in a loving way, and also being a protector and a provider, but not just letting a woman walk all over them. And I think that the Akaash Jasleen situation is evidence of that. Jasleen likes the stuff she gets from Akaash while she walks all over him, and I think he's got some insecurity issues, so he's taking some digs at her for sure, because he's got some insecurity stuff. He's letting her walk all over him. She likes what she gets from that, but she's attracted to the bad boy. And in reality, most women, when they get attracted to the bad boy, it's just that they're craving a guy that has more confidence and a guy who has more of an ability to stand up for himself, has more of an ability to, like, has a backbone, basically. At the end of the day, what women really want is a man that can find that place in the middle that is like a good human, that knows how to treat people well, but also can stand up for himself and can be confident and can take the lead, but also do it in a loving way and isn't self-centered and arrogant, isn't irresponsible. You know, because the bad boy can be thrilling for women, but at the end of the day, he's never gonna feel safe, right? He's never gonna feel stable and safe. It's just the thrill. Whereas the nice guy is gonna feel really, he's never gonna feel safe either, because he's gonna feel really wimpy. He's not gonna feel like stable, you know, like he's got this. He's gonna feel like a pushover. And neither one of those things is really gonna make for a good relationship. Unfortunately, men are programmed to have to be one or the other. And I think, like, you know, the red pill podcasts are going after Akaash because he's falling into the nice guy category. The red pill podcasts are all about pushing this bad boy, like, let's treat women terribly narrative, which isn't healthy either. And I mean, that's one of the problems that I have with a lot of content that's created for men, is they're not actually helping men. You know, they're not helping men become the kind of man that is going to be good in a healthy, stable relationship. Because if they were, they wouldn't be teaching them to treat women like crap. They could actually, like, teach them how to be a good human, but also have a backbone and stand up for themselves. I have seen people talk about a lot of clips of Jasleen and Akaash where, like, even their proposal, or even like Akaash did like a second proposal, it's like a vow renewal thing, and got her a ring and everything, and when he goes in for a kiss, like, she gives him her cheek and like doesn't kiss him. I can give her a little bit of leeway on that, because I do know there's a lot of women that like don't want a guy to mess up their makeup, and he might be a sloppy kisser. I don't know. I do think that when you're talking about like a proposal and somebody doing something really nice for you, I think that there's a way that you can give them a kiss and not like just completely disregard them without messing up your makeup. I don't know. I can give her a little bit of leeway where maybe she doesn't want to wreck the makeup because she knows she's on camera, but it also, the fact that she literally is like almost like giving him the side of her head and stuff, and that's sounding a little bit weird. And I also feel like at this point in their relationship, like, you'd think that she could have a conversation with him about like, okay, could you just give me like a gentle kiss on the cheek, or could you just give me a gentle kiss or something so that you don't mess up my makeup? Like, I think there's ways you can work that out with someone who actually cares about you. It is a little awkward, but I will also say that people are pulling that up as like, oh, he did this, he bought her a ring and did this second proposal, and she just like wouldn't even kiss him on the mouth. But also when she said like, how big is this ring, and he was like, oh, big enough for you to shut up when I tell you to shut up, or something like that. I'm like, Again, I'm like, okay, these both seem like red flag people, like both of them. And sometimes I get to a place where I'm like, if you see two people that are just like glaring red flags, I kind of almost feel like, all right, maybe they should just be together so that other people don't have to deal with their red flags. So there's a lot of guys that think that the way that Jasleen treats Akaash is not the way that a woman should be treating a husband. They're like, oh, he gives her everything and gives her this great life, and she treats him like crap. She's, you know, publicly humiliating him. She does seem to kind of almost like get a kick out of treating him badly. And again, they're arguing it's jokes. Most jokes do have some truth in them, but honestly, like, the way he talks to her and the way he kind of jokes with her, like, I mean, I think that he's obviously like taken some jabs at her. I mean, I will say she does seem to be like taking a lot more jabs at him. I mean, again, I think there's red flags all around. But one thing I will point out with the Akaash and Jasleen situation is that Jasleen she is embarrassing her husband publicly, but she has a life that a lot of women would envy. Like, she doesn't have to work. She even talks about the fact that she pretty much just does Pilates, walks the dog, and just does her podcast now. She doesn't have to. She doesn't need the money. He takes care of her. He takes her shopping and things like that and whatever. I mean, she has a life a lot of women would envy. And a lot of guys are criticizing him for that. And a lot of guys are like, this is why you don't treat a woman well. Look, if as a husband, you're like, that's not how I would want my wife to treat me. Valid. Fine. You also have to have the backbone to stand up for yourself and say, I don't want a wife that treats me this way. And also not marry someone who treats you this way. You can't tell me that this all of a sudden happened overnight. Like, this is probably something that is part of their personality. However, I look at the Jasleen situation and think, yeah, I wouldn't want to disrespect my husband that way publicly. And I also wouldn't want a husband that would tolerate somebody disrespecting him that way publicly, for sure. I also wouldn't want a husband that says some of the things that Akaash says to her publicly, because I think that's embarrassing too, but that's a whole other thing. Their relationship, not something I would want. However, she's getting a lot more in her relationship than I've ever gotten in any of mine. As someone who has always treated their partner respectfully. When I was married to my husband, I wasn't embarrassing him or humiliating him left and right. Even as a comedian, you know, if I ever made a joke or something that he thought was uncomfortable or didn't like, I'd cut it. You know what I mean? Like, I wouldn't do it. I had some jokes about him, but they were always ones that like he said he was okay with. So I felt like I was always being respectful of him. But, you know, he also wasn't paying my bills. You know, he also was not treating me like a princess. It does seem pretty consistently that the women that get treated the best treat their husband the worst. I don't like that reality. As someone who doesn't want to be in a relationship where I treat my husband badly, as someone who doesn't want to be in a relationship with a man who would just let me treat him badly, because I would want to be in a relationship with someone who had more self-respect than that. However, I think men need to take some accountability for the fact that the women that treat men the worst get the best treatment. And that's on men. That's on men. Like, if men don't want women to mistreat them, they have to stop giving all of their time, money, and attention to women who do mistreat them. Men will argue all the time, I want a woman who gives me peace. I want a woman who is my peace. Except that you give all your time, money, and attention to women that bring the drama. You give all your time, money, and attention to women who don't treat you well, who aren't your peace. Like, you keep rewarding women who aren't. They say all the time, I don't want a promiscuous woman. Yet you give all your time, money, and attention to promiscuous women. You have to take some accountability for that, because there's a lot of good women in the world. There's a lot of women out there who don't want to disrespect their husband. There's a lot of good women out there who want to be faithful in a relationship, who don't want to sleep around, who want to have a peaceful life. There's a lot of women who want those things. Those are not the women who are getting treated the best. Those are not the women that you're giving your time, money, and attention to. Those are the women who are typically like living their life on their own, peaceful, because they don't have someone in their life causing drama. As long as men keep giving their time, money, and attention to women who are disrespecting them, who are promiscuous, women who are doing everything that the men claim that they don't want, you're rewarding them, and women are going to keep doing it, or the women that don't want to do it are going to leave. Because as long as a woman who is, you know, the good wife, is the woman who's the loyal wife, the faithful wife, who's there to build with a man from the beginning, who's treating him with respect, who is his peace, who's doing all those things, as long as she's in it until he builds and then he ends up cheating on her or leaving her for the woman that is the drama, who is messy, who is whatever, there's no incentive for a woman to be what men deem as being a good woman, of being the wife type, if the man is just going to run off with the mistress. Which, like I say, women don't want to be wife or mistress, women want to be both. But at the end of the day, if men keep rewarding the mistress type and the wife type just becomes your slave, then there's no incentive for women to do that. And the women that are the wife type, that want to have a peaceful life, the woman who wants to not disrespect her husband or something, she's probably going to not be in a relationship because she's going to want to keep her peace. However, it's the women who are treating men like crap, who are disrespecting men, those are the women that are getting rewarded. And as long as men keep rewarding them, like, you know, you don't like how Jasleen's acting, but you know what? She has a life that a lot of women would envy. And you could argue all the time that, okay, well, Akaash is a simp, and so there'll be simps that will treat women like that. But most men treat women that act like Jasleen better than the women who don't act like her. If men want to change things, then they have to do two things. They have to stop giving all of their time, money, and attention to women who act in a way that they claim that they don't want. You don't want a disrespectful woman, you don't want a promiscuous woman, fine. But stop giving those women your time, money, and attention. You also have to reward the women who do show up as the kind of woman that you want. If you want a woman who's loyal, if you want a woman who's, you know, respectful, if you want those things, you have to reward the women who are doing that. Those are the women that you need to give your time, money, and attention to. That's how it works. Women respond to how men show up. Like the men who complain about the OnlyFans girls. Why are all these women on OnlyFans? Because men are paying them. Because they're getting money from men in order to survive, in order to live their life. And if the women who are the good girls, who are the covered up good girls, are having to slave at work all day, either slave for their husband or slave for a paycheck, where's the incentive? If a woman's gonna be the good girl, but she's gonna be miserable, but the woman who's the bad girl is getting rewarded, women are gonna be bad girls. And who's doing this rewarding? It's men. Women respond to how men show up. If men don't like how women are showing up in society, you gotta look to the men. Do I think that this Akaash and Jasleen Singh thing, I think a lot of it's publicity. I think a lot of it is drama they're stirring up to make themselves, both of them, a lot of money. Yeah, I will say some of the things that Jasleen said that I do agree with. She got a lot of pushback for saying that his money is their money and her money is her money. I absolutely 1000% believe that. And I think any man that disagrees with that, major red flag. He's not ready for a relationship. Absolutely not. I see these things all the time where they're like, oh, if he makes this much money and she makes this much money, like what percentage of his check should go towards the bills and what percentage of her check should go for that math. Like, there's an easy math problem. Whoever has the penis pays the bills. Plain and simple. A woman should never have to pay the bills. Look, my motto is, I will only stress about a man or money, never both. That's the way I live. If I have to stress about money, then I don't need a man in my life. If I have a man in my life, he better make sure I never stress about money again. That doesn't mean that women shouldn't have access to money. That doesn't mean women can't make their own money. They can. But a man should never put you in a position where you have to stress about money. If he is, you don't have a man. You just have another child. I absolutely firmly believe that. Men should be the providers. And men want the credit for being the providers. They don't want to be the providers. So if you are in a relationship with a man, you can make your own money, but that's your money. His money should be both of your money, and he should be paying the bills. He should be covering things, and for a woman, working should always be optional. That's the only way relationships work. Any other way, it doesn't work. And I mean, there's a million different reasons for that I could go into all day. The unequal distribution of actual like labor, emotional labor, household labor, childbirth and child rearing and all that kind of stuff. There's all kinds of reasons for that, but that I will absolutely agree with Jasleen on that. I don't agree with everything that she does and says, but that is very true. If you were gonna have a man in your life, you should never have to stress about money again. If that man is making you stress about money, he doesn't need to be your man, plain and simple. And I don't think that men should only be bringing the financial benefits to a relationship. I think men need to bring more than just financial benefits to a relationship, but taking the financial burden off of you so that you never have to worry about money again should be the bare minimum. I know people are gonna argue, in this economy, whatever. I don't care about the economy, I really don't. Men need to step up and earn enough to support a family, plain and simple. Or don't have a family, or don't be in a relationship, or don't date. If you were a man who's not in a position where you can afford to take a woman on a date, don't date. Focus on making more money. Men need to focus on getting themselves in a position where they can be providers before they focus on being in a relationship. Plain and simple. And I could go on about that all day. But I think any man who has a problem with like, his money is our money, my money is my money, I think any man that has a problem with a woman saying that, it's the same thing as like a man who's so triggered by the phrase like happy wife, happy life. If you give a woman the resources she needs to be happy, she will make your life happy. That is an inherently equal phrase. Men that get triggered by that think, oh, that just means that a woman gets whatever she wants and I don't get anything. No, you get a happy life by making her happy. That's what happens. Like, it is equal, it is even, okay? But you need to provide for her what she needs to be happy, and then she will make your life happy, because women respond to how men show up. But men want women to respond how they want them to respond. It doesn't work like that. Women respond to how men show up. If a man does not like how a woman is showing up, he has to change how he's showing up. He sets the tone. That's how men take the lead. Men's leadership is not about just telling people what to do. It is about showing up and setting the tone. I realize that a lot of men aren't gonna listen to me, and a lot of men don't listen to my content, which is fine. I understand most men need to hear this from other men. I wish there were more men out there, and I think there actually used to be, but a lot of them, like a lot of like the men's content creators that had really good content have kind of gone in a weird direction because they want clicks and views and things like that. Everything has gotten so clickbaity. I actually wish that there were more men online that actually were giving men a good, healthy message. Unfortunately, there's a real lack of that. There's such a lack of healthy masculine leadership in our society, and it's really sad. But I hope that this Akaash and Jasleen Singh situation, like, I hope there were some lessons in this, because some of it wasn't necessarily just targeted at them, but I just think that the drama around them brought up some really interesting topics that I wanted to address. So hopefully you found this video helpful. If you have any thoughts on anything I talked about in this video, or any other video suggestions or anything like that, let me know. Leave a comment in the comment section below. I'd love to hear from you. If you enjoyed this video and found it helpful, please give it a big thumbs up, and be sure you subscribe to my channel. Honestly, any engagement on this channel really does help to boost it in the algorithm so more people can get this message. If you would like to heal your pick-me girl energy, which will actually help you step into your main character energy in a healthy and non-narcissistic way, I highly recommend you check out my guided journals, the Recovering Pick-Me Girl guided journal and the Dark Feminine Energy guided journal. They're both available on Amazon. Details are in the description box below, along with links to all my social media accounts. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope you join me next time.